Welcome back, everyone. I'm Viva Luck Gamer, and we're back with another build a day later than I was expecting. Sleeping schedule's honestly been a mess, but still a really good one, as this is going to be using a Barbarian instinct I feel like a lot of people, well, kind of just look over, and understandably so, but it's something that I find quite baffling considering the sheer amount of roleplay goodness that can be used, and in addition, it just works really, really well. Today, we're talking about the Seething Witch Hunter, a Barbarian Rage build that specifically is about targeting any spellcasting creatures, which, you know what, I'll get to that when I talk about the instinct. But your job is to make it so they can never cast spells, and you're going to be really, really good at it. So let's go ahead and get into the build already. All right, so starting off, the key attributes you want to be focusing on is, of course, going to be your strength, being number 1. Then it's going to be followed by your con. This is super important as the Superstition Barbarian prevents you from accepting any kind of magical healing, which is one of the most relevant kinds in the game. And depending on your party comp, this is more than likely going to cause issues. So having as much HP as possible is going to help you just not die as much, as you have less options for healing. And for our third attribute that I'm going to say we should specialize in is actually going to be intelligence. Yes, a weird one indeed, but it will make a ton of sense when we get into the build itself. Speaking on the build itself, skill focuses. So the skill focuses are predominantly going to rotate around athletics, which is going to be your method of dealing with spellcasters. Predominantly, the big thing you want to do in this build is grab the spellcaster, because not only does this cost any actions with the manipulate trait, including spellcasting with somatic components, to have a chance of failing with the DC 5 flat check, but it also just prevents them from running away. So you want to be as strong as possible and have as high of an athletics as possible. Second is actually going to be medicine. We're going to be taking a lot of advantage of battle medicine in this build, and not necessarily for the build, but because of the build. In a sense, we're not taking a lot of feats necessarily orientated around battle medicine, but battle medicine is going to be our primary method of healing in combat, besides consuming potions and elixirs, as Superstition Barbarian actually does not prevent you from consuming magical potions. Strange enough, but they obviously didn't want to nerf the instinct that much. And third is going to be crafting, and that's going to be a little secret for now, as we're going to get into the build here. I'll let you all decide how crafting is going to play a big part. I've kind of led into this a little bit, but let's go ahead and talk about the Superstition instinct for the Barbarian. So the Superstition instinct is a very controversial instinct for Barbarian, but is core to the build because the main concept is your ability to deal with magic casters better than anyone else. And Superstition does just that. So, and I'm going to be reading off some of it here because there's a lot of information. Essentially, the anathema, or the anathema, however you want to pronounce it, of Superstition instinct is you can't accept spells or spell-like things, like from scrolls or wands or the like, even from allies. You can't cast them yourself, and your allies can't cast them on you. And if your ally continues to cast it on you, you have to choose to leave the party. Now, obviously, this is something that in your game you need to discuss with the fellow players, and you need to let them know this is how it works. The GM also needs to, arbitrate this a little bit to make sure that everyone understands not to do this for your character, and they don't have to. The build is going to solve a lot of our problems for us. So that being the case, our anathema is really, really going to be simple in the fact that we just can't accept any magical healing or any buffs, but we'll be doing that ourselves, so no need to worry. Now, this big kind of drawback comes at a substantial instinct ability for the Superstition instinct. So the Instinct ability gives you a +2 status bonus to any saves against magic. This also increases your rage damage against magic casting creatures, and eventually you do get the ability to do extra rage damage to everyone. But predominantly, you are only going to do extra damage to specifically any creature that is capable of casting spells. Now, that's actually a much wider net than you might think. Most Fae actually cast spells. So you can look at this as rage damage that applies to Fae, and actually, most devils and demons, and probably daemons, I actually didn't look, but probably daemons as well, also are capable of casting spells. And now the game doesn't really have a difference between innate magic versus not innate magic. So, any kind of enemy that even has just the ability to cast the light cantrip actually counts. Now, it's still not going to be the highest of rage damage, actually tying with the Fury Instinct Barbarian, but still, it's something to keep in mind. And in addition, on top of the fact that this class already has some trouble healing, pretty much once every 10 minutes, when you rage, you regain your hit points equal to the temporary hit points you gain from the rage action. So what this means is that even if we're a little bit damaged between battles, we actually don't need to worry about it as much, as we're going to be getting, level plus constitution modifier in temp HP whenever we rage, or in temp HP and actual HP, making it a lot easier for us to top ourselves off, more or less. So already, the instinct ability is nuts. It's really, really powerful, actually. The bonus to will saves is incredibly strong, and the fact that we get healing in addition to our temp HP from rage just keeps us on our feet. Now, as I mentioned before, eventually we get up to 12 rage damage against creatures that cast spells, and 8 against all other creatures, but that's only when you get the greater rage specialization. And then raging resistance is going to give us pretty much resistance to any damage or effect from a spell from 2 of the 4 traditions, making you incredibly durable against a lot of just generally nasty area effects or the like, and a good number of spells, even for will-based spells that have saves that we're obviously going to be a bit weaker against. We're actually going to have not only just a better resistance because of our instinct, but this resistance to that damage potentially if it's found. Now, obviously, I'm going to recommend you're going to use the Arcane tradition, and then probably Occult would be my second one. If you pick those two, you're going to pick up most of the spells in the game. The Arcane list is nuts, and the Occult list has most of the spells that we're going to be weakest against, since they predominantly target will saves. In any regard, whatever you choose, it's going to be very good. So let's go ahead and start off with what feats we're selecting. So at first level, when we make our character, we're going to be getting Sudden Charge. Sudden Charge is just really good. It lets you stride twice and strike with the action if you end adjacent to an enemy. One of the reasons why I wanted to select this one particularly is the main thing is you're going to find casters are either going to be in hard to reach places or in the back line. So we're going to make a mad dash towards them and dive in to strike them and get to them as quickly as possible. The quicker you get to your target, essentially, the faster you're going to be able to disable that spellcaster and make them not a problem for the rest of your team. The rest of your team is going to have to back you up in this situation, but, your job is to handle the mage, so that's what you're set out to do. And that's kind of the theme of the build, right? You're a mage hunter. You're a witch hunter, in a sense. You're after anyone who casts spells. You are not necessarily a barbarian. Your character just has either some kind of trauma around magic casters, some kind of particular hatred for them, or a deep fear seated in the fact that you know of the atrocities, there we go, that they're capable of. That being the case, whatever you justify it, this build goes beyond barbarian. And in fact, because of that, because you don't even get a rage damage to other types of enemies, you're actually not as motivated to use rage actions as other barbarians tend to be, freeing you up to kind of explore outside of the class as much as you like, which I think is a really good thing. And you still get a lot of good barbarian features. Obviously, they're very high health pool, and a lot of they're also just really good martial characters in general. But I wanted to make special mention of the fact that you're actually just more of a specialized hunter than you are a barbarian. That makes it so that whatever you're doing, you have purpose in battles. And whenever there's not a spellcasting enemy available, well, then you can just use whatever tricks. And I've put plenty into this build. In fact, starting at 2nd level, as long as you get +2 because of the remaster in your intelligence, we're actually going to be picking up the Alchemist Dedication. Now, the Alchemist Dedication is really good because not only does it give you crafting as a proficiency, so you actually don't even need to invest in it right away, but you also get alchemical crafting feat, and you learn 4 basic potions, and you get a number of alchemical items that you can craft every day. So getting advanced alchemy, you also get a number of infused reagents equal to your level, which means that after our +2 in intelligence, we're not going to necessarily need to invest in intelligence much more in the build, but you probably will want to with some of the other things, like that, for the fact that we're going to be using medicine, and the higher your intelligence, the more likely you are to get the higher checks required for battle medicine to heal yourself more often. And as well for crafting items as well. One of the great things about the Alchemist Dedication isn't even the advanced alchemy, which is really good, mind you. The advanced alchemy will essentially allow us to make twice our level in level 1 alchemical potions every day, giving us plenty of elixirs of life and possibly even some mutagens that could be very helpful for the build. But the other advantage is because we get alchemical crafting, with your downtime, you can just craft up batches of 4 alchemical items to, well, pretty much make it easier for you to make a bunch of alchemical items. This can make your life a lot easier, and not only that, but whenever you add new recipes to your alchemy book to learn to make on your own, you're not limited to that level 1. That's only for your daily preparation stuff. You're going to be able to make whatever items necessary to keep your character alive, meaning that your healers don't really need to worry about you. You're going to be completely fine. And this kind of gives the character a more like Witcher-esque aesthetic, which I honestly really like. At level 4, we're going to pick up Fast Movement. It's a really good one. It gives us a +10 SAS bonus when we're raging, making it much easier for us to dive into the backline after their mage. So just one I thought I'd pick up. You could also substitute Fast Movement for getting a level 2 alchemy feat where you could pick up the it's like restorative mutagen or something like that. That allows you to essentially metabolize a mutagen, getting an amount of HP based on the level of the item, which you can do after combat, actually, after your rage has already ended. So whichever you prefer. If you want more tankiness, I would go with that option, but if you want just to move faster, then Fast Movement is probably going to be your best bet. At level 6, we're going to be picking up Mage Hunter. Now, I know Mage Hunter is a very particularly controversial pick because Reactive Strike, or Attack of Opportunity as it was known before the remaster, was considered just better in every way. If a spellcaster uses a spell that has a, the manipulate traits, a somatic component, essentially, it would still do the same thing as Mage Hunter. But Mage Hunter doesn't apply to things that have movements or things that have, just movement or the manipulate trait. So why pick Mage Hunter over Reactive Strike? Well, Mage Hunter actually works against spells that don't have verbal components. Now, while there may not be too many of those, there are a good number of escape spells specifically because they're designed to get away from characters who have Reactive Strike. Mage Hunter prevents this and is actually the only way to prevent this, besides, I think, Fighter gets one that works on concentrate actions as well, but that's completely irrelevant. You wouldn't be able to select that in as a Barbarian anyway. So that being the case, Mage Hunter is the best. And while it does lack some of the other utility, general utility of Reactive Strike normally, I think it's well worth it for the job. We want it for one purpose and one purpose only, right? To stop a mage from casting. And to be fair, they can still just step away from you and cast, but they could do that anyway, even if you had Reactive Strike normally. So why not just make sure there's no option and give Mage Hunter a try? Also, this ties into one of the main features of the build, which is grappling. You're going to grapple the enemy, and this is already going to prevent the mage from escaping unless they make an escape check against your massive athletics DC. Well, they're not going to be able to, so their last-ditch effort is going to be to attempt to cast a spell. And the best part about this is your crit chance is actually really good because you're grappling the enemy. They're going to be considered off guard to the attack. So you have just a better chance of critting them and disrupting the spell. Overall, in the end, it's whatever you want. I prefer Mage Hunter because it suits the build better and it prevents a mage from doing a tricky maneuver to get away from you where Reactive Strike would fail. So it pretty much, you just are a better Mage Hunter when you select Mage Hunter. It makes a ton of sense, but still, it's just one of those things where people will argue and they can take Reactive Strike and get most of the benefits, but they're still not going to be as good of a Mage Hunter as someone who takes Mage Hunter here. So the choice is yours. All right, at level 8, we're going to be taking Expert Alchemy, and the main reason for this is it's going to give us access to level 3 alchemical items for our daily crafting, which is one of the steps up for most alchemical items, especially mutagens. So mutagens is a good way to alter your character without necessarily needing to level up to do so. And when you get the level 3 version, you're going to get a +2 to most checks that the mutagen gives bonuses to, which is pretty massive. And even for like weapons, say if you were to take a Bestial mutagen to get an unarmed strike with a +2, you still at level 8 might not have a +2 weapon. You should, but you might not. So this is a good way to get access to that. But there's also just a wide variety of reasons. There's also just you get the, I think, lesser or minor Elixer of Life, which gives you just more HP, which can just mean you can take more Elixirs of Life that have more HP to give you. So either way, Expert Alchemy is going to be really, really good for the build. So next up is Silencing Strike, and I think this one makes a lot of sense, obviously. So essentially, it's a single action strike that when it causes the opponent to make a fort save against your class DC, and if they fail, they become stunned 1, and they need to make a DC 11 flat check to use any linguistic-based checks or to use a verbal spellcasting component until the end of their next turn. Really good. It pretty much increases or reduces the chances that an enemy is going to be able to cast a turn once you're in range. It just requires a hit to make, which makes it really, really good. And the best part is that if they crit fail the check for whatever reason, the creature is stunned 3 rather than stunned 1, meaning you could potentially make them lose their whole turn. A really good strike, and it doesn't even have Flourish, so you could do it multiple times. It's really good. Now, I will state that this does have the Incapacitation trait, so a enemy that is higher level than you will have a bonus to resist it. That's okay. I mean, obviously, spellcasters tend to be a little bit higher level than other members on the battlefield, but they also don't tend to have the best fortitude, and their fortitude is going to be typically less than 2 points difference than their highest save. So even with that 2-point difference, it's still they still have a pretty good chance of failing, honestly. And even if they don't, we have other measures. I mean, we have Mage Hunter after all. So just, something to keep in mind with it is it does have the Incapacitation trait. Next up, level 12, we're getting probably the key feature of the entire build, and that is going to be Sunder Spell. Sunder Spell is very good. not only does it allow you to strike an enemy, to remove enchantments from them, but you can also do this against magical effects or magical manifestations as well. For instance, Spiritual Guardian, Spiritual Weapon, Wall of Flame, Entangle, you know, any area that essentially has a magical effect ongoing in it, you can easily strike it and attempt to essentially counteract the effect. And the counteract effect is based on the strike that you make, which is something is really, really good in this situation. And your counteract or effect level is going to be half your level, which is pretty standard. For 2 actions, this spell is nuts and can help your team in a lot of situations. Banishing illusions, anything. There's just so much that Sunder Spell can do that it would be silly not to take it. And the thing is, this is Superstition Barbarian specific, or Superstition Instinct, I should say, specific. This effect is one of the most powerful effects in the game that's anti-magic anyway. And this is the whole reason you would take Superstition Instinct. Just this one feat, it's so good. At level 14, Sunder Spell becomes even better, and it becomes useful even if the enemy doesn't cast spells. And that's going to be Sunder Enchantment. This is absolutely nuts. This is such a good ability. Essentially, when you use Sunder Spell, you can instead choose to target a unattended magic item or one of your target's magic items. And fun fact, any weapon that has a potency rune on it is a magic weapon. And in fact, they're found in the book, or on Archive Nethys especially, as basic magic weapons, making them a magic item that you can target. And if you succeed on the counteract strike, which, by the way, this is particularly dirty because the counteract level that you're trying to aim for is based on the item you're striking. So by this time, a +2 greater striking item is actually going to be quite easy for you to counteract. And when you do, it becomes a mundane item for 10 minutes. That's a good way to nerf an enemy's damage, removing damage dice, removing chance to hit. This is a really powerful effect. Sunder Enchantment is nuts. It's just good. Superstition Barbarian lives for level 12 and 14. Once you hit these levels, you've won the game. It's so good. Now, obviously, this isn't going to work against absolutely everything, but it works against a lot of things. So many enemies in the book have weapons that are +1 or higher, and you're just going to be able to turn those into nothing, just nerfing the enemy. And it's a nerf that essentially stacks with all other nerfs, because there's not many abilities in the game, or any that I can think of, that actually get rid of item bonuses. This is one of the very few item penalties, essentially, you can deal in the game, which is really fun. And it makes the Superstition Barbarian incredibly powerful. It's honestly one of the things that so this whole build, right? Sunder Spell, Sunder Enchantment makes you really good in so many situations. The enemy summons enemies. You can dispel them with Sunder Spell. The enemies wearing just like good magic armor. Bam! It's now just a normal plate mail or whatever. These effects turn your character into the perfect nerf bat for enemies. It's really good. I can't say more. This is the whole reason you would pick this build, honestly. At level 16, we're going to be taking Master Alchemy. The biggest part about this is because we're selecting this at level 16, this is going to increase our advanced alchemy level to the level 11 alchemical items. These are the items that give typically the +3 item bonus. We might not even have a +3 item at this point in the game, and thus these +3 item bonuses are going to be really, really good. Plus the mutagens that you get will get the +3 item bonus. And of course, it'll keep going up in level as we get to level 20, where I believe the difference is, it's 5, right? Yeah, so the highest would be level 15 alchemical items, which honestly you wouldn't even need much more than that. Granted, I do believe the highest level ones are level 17, which you can't get to those. Nonetheless, at level 16, you're able to make 32 items of level 11 during your daily preparations. It's pretty good. And again, it gives our unique Witch Hunter just a twist that makes them much more than a Barbarian. Now, at level 18, I went for Brutal Critical. Honestly, the biggest reason is we're just a heavy-hitting melee character who's grabbing squishies and beating them to death. And and so just doing more damage when you sometimes crit them is even better. So yeah, it just makes your character do more damage. At 18 and 20, you can pretty much pick anything. Brutal Critical just makes the most sense to me because the enemies we're going to be fighting are not going to be having much defense, especially spellcasters, because they don't wear heavy armor, and whatever magical enchantments they are using to defend themselves, Sunder Spell, they're gone. So, we're beating children at this point in the build. And the last feat at level 20, I took Unstoppable Juggernaut. This is just a really good feature, and it pretty much just enhances your resistance to 2 traditions of spell to just make it pretty much like everything. Plus, all kinds of... Unstoppable Juggernaut just makes you harder to kill, and with a character who at this point is probably already self-sufficient enough on keeping their health up, well, this is just going to be a way to make sure that you are even more durable and harder to kill. Granted, as I said before, level 18 and level 20, it really doesn't matter what you pick up. All right, now, I don't typically do this, but with this build, I wanted to name some skill feats that I feel would be good for some decent reasons. Now, for the athletics ones, I mostly went with jump-based feats. Now, the biggest reason why I went with jump-based feats is, one, there's a lot of them, and they let you jump really high and really far when you stack them all together. But 2, again, when mages are in places that are hard to reach, leaping is really good. It helps you get over difficult terrain. It helps you do all kinds of things. So the first few feats I'm going to mention are going to be Quick Jump, Powerful Leap, and Cloud Jump. They just make you jump higher, further, farther, faster. So very simple, very simple. Then we're going to go on to Battle Medicine, Godless Healing, and Mortal Healing. Now, the biggest reasons why we kind of went down this line is Battle Medicine. We're going to use it to stitch ourselves up in combat when we're not raging, because it requires the concentrate, or it has the concentrate trait. But Godless Healing and Mortal Healing essentially gives us benefits when not using any kind of spell casting with our healing, which we never are on ourselves. Thus, we become a pretty decent healer to ourselves, even without the alchemical items that we're chugging like repeatedly. So yeah, there's a lot of really fun ways we can use a lot of these skill feats to make our character just very solid, very self-sufficient in many, many ways. Now, when it comes to equipment, I'm going to recommend the Boots of Bounding. Boots of Bounding, one of my favorite items. It gives you a item bonus to your speed, which is very good. There's not many item bonus speeds in the game. Not even like Cheetah Elixir, which actually gives you a status, which is unfortunate because that does clash with fast movement. Oh well. But it also makes your jumping better. So Boots of Bounding, super solid. And when it comes to weapons for this build, any weapon with the grapple trait will really work. Grappling is going to be super necessary in this build. If it's a reach grapple weapon, all the better. Or you could just go with a one-handed weapon and, of course, go and grab them and then beat them with that weapon. However you want to do it. There's a lot of ways it can be done. The biggest thing is make sure you have grapple somewhere because you want to get item bonus to your grapple checks. Oh, I totally forgot archetypes. So archetypes for this build, I think, are pretty easy, but they can also be super diverse. First and foremost is going to be Medic. Medic is going to allow us to not only be better at treating our own wounds, but those of our allies as well, making this potentially a really good Medic Barbarian build that is very unique and rare and can show your character having a lot of unique ways of using medicine. And actually to go, if you're using free archetype, obviously, to go along with Medic, I'm actually going to recommend Herbalist. Herbalist allows us to kind of combine some of our alchemical prowess into certain items that have the healing trait, like Elixirs of Life, and turn them into poultices, meaning that even if you're sickened, you're still capable of applying these to yourself or your allies. Herbalist is a very good way to augment Medic and to augment your alchemical abilities already. Last but not least is going to be the Wrestler Dedication. The Wrestler Dedication, since we're so like determined to grapple our enemies anyway, well, it just makes a lot of sense to take a class or an archetype that gives us all kinds of ways of hurting enemies that we have grabbed. I mean, Wrestler, you're just going to be suplexing a wizard, and that's just the best thing. So yeah, Witch Hunter plus the Wrestler makes for suplexing wizards, which is just top tabletop, I'll tell you. It's tabletop at its finest. It's just mwah, chef's kiss. Now, I'm also going to include some alchemical items since Alchemist is a part of this build, and there's just a metric ton of alchemical items in the game, so you're going to want to know, what to select. I picked a few. Obviously, you're going to want to take Elixer of Life. Elixir of Life is a very standard pick. It's your healing item. You just take it. You can make a bunch of them during your daily preparation, so there's no reason not to. Next up is actually going to be the Serene Mutagen. The Serene Mutagen will give us an item bonus to our will saves that does stack with our status bonus to magic saves, meaning that we can eventually get up to, I believe, a +5 to magic save or magic related will saves when using this. Now, it is not the best for combat. It does reduce some of your damage, but you're a barbarian, so you already do a bunch of extra damage anyway. Mutagens and barbarians go together so well because even though they take a nerf to their damage, it's so minor most of the time because they do so much extra damage that it's honestly worth the cost. So Serene Mutagen is definitely one I'm going to recommend. In addition to the Sinew-Shock Serum, this is actually really good since you're going to not be able to get many ways of removing debuffs on yourself like Clumsy, Enfeebled, or the like. Sinew-Shock is really good for getting rid of those kinds of effects. And since those kind of things affect your character more particularly than others, taking a couple of these every day with you is just going to be a really good benefit to you. So I highly recommend picking up Sinew-Shock just to take a couple with you every day. Last is going to be the Soothing Tonic, and this is a really good one because it gives you fast healing. And fast healing means we're tankier. Plain and simple, works really well with our character. And something I want to mention as well, even though we can't use Quick Alchemy with this build, obviously, because if you're raging, you can't use Quick Alchemy, there's nothing stopping a raging barbarian from consuming potions. So, mutagens, potions, you can use these things while raging without necessarily using the concentrate action. They have manipulate, but that's it. So, having a single-handed weapon is actually what really benefits the style of chugging things. You can even go drug-based barbarian with this build if you really want to. I think that's a very cool style of character. But a lot of the drugs in the game, I feel like, have too big a downsides for me to make the build about that. But if you want to make a drug buster style of witch hunting barbarian, I think that's also super cool. Ancestries. Now, I'm going to do something that's only half cringe. First of all, I'm going to recommend half-elf. Human half-elf, specifically. Human, yes, I know, they show up in my builds all the time. Human's really good, okay? But there's a specific one. It's actually Witch Warden. Witch Warden is a really good feat that you can only select if you're a human from the Kelid, region. And being a half-elf makes you both human and elf. And being a Kelid elf actually makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Kelid are I'm not going to go into the lore thing. Kelid are one of the most common ethnicities of human out there, actually. They're one of, 3 major ones in Northern of Easton, anyway. So being a half-elf is really good. You want to be able to take Witch Warden, and then you're going to also want to be able to take Nimble Elf to get a just flat bonus to our speed. So with Fleet, Nimble Elf, and fast movement, our character is going to get a standard +10 to their movement speed and an additional 10 for a grand total of 45 movement speed while raging. So when you use your sudden dash, you're right up next on the enemy, and it's really good. It's a really good combination. One I highly recommend. You could also go with Orc. Orc actually has a lot of good superstition-based feats that you can utilize that enhance your magic resistance and abilities. So that's something as well. And I also want to mention, so I didn't say this, but with Witch Warden and the Orc Superstition feats, they give you circumstance bonuses against spells, which weren't specifically giving you a circumstance against all spells and effects from witches and hags. Hags being one of the very most common enemy types that you run into, at least up until level 10, give or take. Witches or hags having a +3 difference, +6 potentially with Serum Mutagen, it makes you really hard to affect with will saves of all things. As a barbarian, you become pretty much just impossible to affect with a lot of magical effects, especially from witches and hags. And same thing with the superstition of feats. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff here that is really, really good. And for my third ancestry, I'm going to say Hobgoblin, just because it has actually a lot of feats that benefit alchemical things. So if you want to lean a lot more into your alchemical side, Hobgoblin is not a bad way to go about it. And Hobgoblins, I think, also have cultural things against magic users specifically. So yeah, Hobgoblin is also just not a bad choice. But that is going to be it for the Seething Witch Hunter. Hopefully you all enjoyed. This uses a very undertaken, not popular style of instinct, and even though I understand some of the reasons, it also has some of the best feats Barbarian has to offer. And so I figured this build would be a way to not only show you the benefits of playing a Superstition Instinct Barbarian, but also to give you a very cool thematic build to go with it. And of course, I'm always a sucker for Witcher style builds, and this is very similar to that. That's going to be it for me. Please let me know what you think of this build down in the comments. Also, if you could leave a like or subscribe on your way down there, you know, there's not many people making Pathfinder builds out there right now. So, you know, this might be the only place you really have to go. Just saying. It's a monopoly only if I have no competition, right? Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Lead the bad luck to me. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.